Montreal has been the location of hundreds of feature films. It is one of the big hubs of feature film and television production on the East Coast.
Sidewalk's blocked because of a movie set. And look, they're making fake snow.
It looks like it was shot in Montreal because it's a whole lot of French-Canadian names in the credits.
Actual snow, which is nice because when they fake it, that can be annoying.
Shooting in Montreal has been amazing. In the summer, you can't really get any better than that.
Montreal has just a great energy and texture that exists within the show.
Apparently, a famous movie was filmed on this street, around this corner, in front of the Victoria's Secret.
Over the past 30 years, more than 8,000 movies, TV shows, and advertisements have been shot in Montreal.
Because of its wide range of architecture, it stands in for other cities that are more difficult, more expensive, or further away. Paris in Benjamin Button, New Orleans in Benjamin Button, New York City for John Wick, Berlin for Confessions of a Dangerous Mind.
That's the beauty of Montreal, is that it's so diverse, not only in its architecture, but in its culture as well. Right? So you can really get away with anything in the city.
Are You Afraid of the Dark? Oh my gosh, that was an awesome show. That show used to scare me.
Are you afraid of the dark? Why, yes. Yes, I am.
I kind of am.
Are You Afraid of the Dark was the Nickelodeon-produced, Canadian-made kids' take on horror anthology shows such as Twilight Zone and Tales from the Crypt. It's pretty much the same concept as Goosebumps, but I always thought this show was a lot scarier. Not to mention it aired 4 years earlier.
Are You Afraid of the Dark is the only one of these horror kid shows to actually give me physical nightmares. I personally remember this being the one show that carried me out of my childhood altogether and allowed me to develop into the well-rounded, anxious, paranoid-ridden adult that I am today. I wouldn't change a thing about it.
When I was a kid, Nickelodeon was like the channel to watch. On Saturdays, they had this 2-hour block called Snick, where the good stuff was. This is where you could watch like Clarissa Explains It All, Ren and Stimpy, and one of my favorite shows of all time, Are You Afraid of the Dark?
We wanted to do primetime shows for kids, but it was very hard to beat that economics. So we decided Saturday night was a very bad night for television. Let's give it up to kids.
There is nothing in the dark that isn't there in the light. Or is there? Tune in for another tale of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Tomorrow at 7:30, 6:30 Central on Nickelodeon.
It was big on Nickelodeon back in the day. I remember they had marathons of it from time to time, and you weren't in school and it's time to get scared, and it was just so much fun. Every single episode was a bunch of kids who gather around a campfire at night and tell each other ghost stories. They're known as the Midnight Society, and every single story they tell is then played out for us and we get to watch them.
I can remember the very first episode I saw was the tale of the Laughing in the Dark. And I can remember that Zebo clown scared the crap out of me.
What do you think I am, some kind of clown?
And just like that, I was hooked and made sure that I watched every episode.
It ended decades ago and we're still having nightmares, proving itself to be the king of 90s kids horror shows.
Are You Afraid of the Dark was the brainchild of American writer, director, and producer Donald James McHale, often known as DJ McHale, and executive producer Ned Candle.
It was a co-production between Nickelodeon and then a Canadian company called Cinar. They were based in Montreal, so the show was largely filmed in Montreal, as well as in and around Vancouver and a few other Canadian locations, but principally Montreal.
It is fascinating that this is one of the best shows ever to be shot in Montreal. One of the best Canadian produced shows. But this is essentially an American show that was filmed in Canada and wasn't even embraced by YTV until its second season. Is that correct?
I mean, everyone calls it a Canadian show, and in many ways it was, because we shot it in Canada, shot it in Montreal, where you live. So many of the very talented people who worked on the show are Canadians and live in Canada. But the show did not originate in Canada. It originated and was developed by Nickelodeon. So we love your show. We're like, yay, we want to make your show. Yay, we don't want to pay for your show. What? They're like, yeah, we only want to pay for half of it because we only want the show to be on Nickelodeon. And there's a value to the show in the rest of the world. So if you can come up with the other half of the money, we'll do the show. My brilliant partner, Ned, if he hadn't done this, he went to, he knew this company in Montreal called Cinar, which made cartoons. We got the show, we got half the budget. You put in the other half, and for the other half, you get to have international distribution. And they're like, Sure. That's why we ended up in Canada. But it was a Nickelodeon show.
So yeah, Are You Afraid of the Dark became a Canadian production, which seems fitting as Canada has produced several really creepy live-action medias for kids.
Oh, Canada. You've given me so many great things. Letterkenny, The Hip, Ginger Snaps, Rush. Speaking of Letterkenny, Jacob Tierney and Danielle Petronovich had parts on the show.
Look at these credits, it reeks of Canada. Jean-Marie Comieux, real Praux? Oh, thank God we got the real one.
Most of the actors and crew are Canadian on the show, including, importantly, the art director. His name is Réal Proulx. And I think art direction is really important in this show because there's always like creepy monsters and kind of interesting practical special effects that of the type you don't see anymore. So
and it looks great.
And it looks good.
People say, oh, Are You Afraid of the Dark was a Canadian show. To the extent that it was a French-Canadian show. It's Montreal, it's Quebec. Most of our crew were French Canadians. There's a very different sensibility, a French sensibility than there is an English sensibility. To our advantage, I think it gave the art direction of the show. Réal Proulx was the art director, so it gave a really interesting design and look to the show.
There's a lot of just like costume and makeup and trickery, wiring and whatnot.
Hi, I'm Monique Chartier. I was the key makeup artist on all of Are You Afraid of Dark episodes. And I created most of the monsters and the looks of Are You Afraid of the Dark.
You haven't changed at all. You look exactly the same.
I know,
right?
But to see Ross, Daniel, and Jason like in the same shot down here is really kind of surreal.
Pretty cool. 3 of the Midnight Society members all hanging out.
Every episode starts with the Midnight Society, a group of kids from different schools with different friends, but the same Canadian wardrobe team.
The campfire scenes were apparently filmed on sound stages. Yeah, it was a set. And for each season, the campfire scenes would be filmed simultaneously, with the filming lasting about a week. I swear I was today years old when I found out that the campfire scenes were filmed on a set, as it looked so real and it looked so magical.
For our own global meteorologist, Ross Hall, the legacy of Are You Afraid of the Dark started back in 1990 on a few wooden logs on the Montreal set.
The Montreal factor, right? Rain, Carrie Cool played Betty Ann, was from Montreal. Jody, who played Kiki, was also from Montreal. And my sister had worked with Jody on some projects. And Rain and I had actually gone to CJEP, the same CJEP, John Abbott, as well. So there was already those connections.
I gotta shout out Jodie Rester as Kiki because she was also the voice of Francine on Arthur.
You say that like it's a good thing. Buster Baxter, I'm gonna pulverize you!
Are You Afraid of the Dark and Arthur were both produced by Sonar, and there are a number of Montreal actors who appear in both shows.
When we cast the series Midnight Society, he chose the Mickey Mouse Club instead. It's a questionable decision because he was in the Mickey Mouse Club with Christina Aguilera and Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears. And it was a questionable choice on his part. But he went to Florida and he shot a couple seasons and then they got canceled. And he came home. We're like, hey, that kid's back. So we got him in an episode of the show.
Is that Joanna Swisher? Any fans of the show Reba out there?
Joanna Garcia, she was great too. We developed a good friendship. She was new to Montreal. She was from Florida, so coming to Montreal, coming to Canada, as she would call it, was a new experience for her. So it was cool to sort of take her around and show her some of the differences between, Montreal and the US.
I was about 14 when I started the show, and it was awesome because, we were able to shoot a whole season in a couple of weeks because it was just the beginning and the end of the episodes. So my parents were okay with me doing that and missing school because it meant that I still, the majority of the time, lived a normal high schooler life. But then I would hop off to Canada to shoot those. But it was really fun, and they were scary.
Season 3 saw Daniel DeSanta join in as Ross's brother, but you may also remember him from the classic Mean Girls scene.
We're doing a lunchtime survey of new students. Can you answer a few questions?
Okay.
Is your muffin buttered?
What?
So, are we gonna keep this going?
The second batch of Midnight Society kids is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, you have Alicia Cuthbert, Vanessa Lengi.
Vanessa was great. Yeah, she was a kid too when she started, man. Yeah.
Alicia Cuthbert. She went on to fame in The Girl Next Door.
I just saw you naked.
What?
And 24.
I don't want to lose you.
It was a huge thing to get, and then to be one of the lucky ones to be around the campfire, which got you on every single episode, was such a huge honor at that time. I remember thinking, I've made it.
A sofa?
Yeah, I know they're disgusting, but I do not sit on logs.
And I hope Daniel's parents aren't watching this part because, well, let's just say Daniel lost his drinking virginity at a bar in Montreal while Joanna Garcia and I looked on.
Ooh.
So we're on the patio, the waiter comes over, and I said, y'all have a beer? And he said, what kind of beer? And I had nothing. I just knew what my father used to drink, and it was Labatt Blue. So I said, Labatt Blue? He said, okay. And then he went away, and he brought me a Labatt Blue, and I had my first beer in Montreal, mom and dad, with the guy that you were so happy that was there looking after me.
Oh yeah, and in case I haven't ruined the magic enough for you guys, the magical dust that was sprinkled into the fire, which would create big flames and make the fire sparkle, well, that magic dust was in fact Coffee Mate, which is a lactose-free powder creamer that you put in your coffee.
Hey!
Given that the show is an anthology that also ran for 91 episodes, it's unsurprising that the cast is gigantic. Hundreds and hundreds of actors on IMDb.
Every season, I go down to New York, and then I go up to Montreal, seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids.
Stars include future Scream Queen Neve Campbell and Emmanuel Shrieky. Mia Kirshner and Jay Baruchel also make appearances.
Hayden Christensen, aka Anakin Skywalker, and one episode has both Gilbert Gottfried.
So I made a teensy-weensy little mistake, and I was about to send an innocent young boy to his death.
And Kid Ryan Gosling.
That's crazy that Ryan Gosling was in it. Like, I did not expect that.
Aaron Ashmore, who would go on to play Jimmy Olsen in Smallville, starred in 2 episodes, and Sabrina the Teenage Witch actress Melissa Joan Hart starred in an episode called The Tale of the Frozen Ghost. And Eddie K. Thomas, who would go on to star as Finch in American Pie, featured in an episode called The Tale of the Curious Camera. It seems like Are You Afraid of the Dark was something of a starting up launch pad for young actors to try and get their careers off the ground.
So what's this place like?
It's okay. Dr. Vink is kind of...
Dr. Fink?
Vink with a v.
Dr. Vink, as he says. And Aaron Taggart, he just chews the scenery in every episode he appears in.
I just remember when I first saw the character of Dr. Vink, he really reminded me of Hagrid from Harry Potter. Like, I was like,
That's right.
Did she steal this?
What is it?
Specialty of the house, le potage dangereux.
The dangerous soup.
Are You Afraid of the Dark was Twilight Zone for kids. We took very real kids who were going through very real dilemmas that all kids could relate to, and then they happened to run into a boogeyman.
So how did those behind the stories manage to come up with so many different, innovative, and fascinating tales? Well, it goes back to the series creator DJ McHale.
What I would do is, during the writing process, I would go to Montreal with the location manager, and I'd say, show me cool stuff. Because Montreal's a very cool city. It's a very unique city. It's a lovely city. It's not like any typical American type city. With the architecture, and it's really wonderful. I love Montreal. And so she would just take me and show me cool things. And a lot of times I would kind of re-engineer a story based on a location. The obvious one that springs to mind was she took me to this 1930s era water treatment facility. It was really cool looking. It was really old, and they had all these tanks of water that I don't know what they were treating it for, but it was really visually stunning and whatnot. And I thought, oh, I could write a story about this. What if these tanks were incubators? What if they were growing things in these tanks?
Nice.
And so from that grew the story called The Hatching. There's the school run by lizard people. I was talking to the DP, lighting it, and he's like, how do you find these places?
McHale, in an interview from 2012, he actually comments on the Montreal production this way. He says, when we first started shooting for the show, the film industry in Montreal was doing very badly. So we were the only game in town, so we had the run of the place. All of this great stuff for a low budget show. He knew that they were getting like a lot of bang for their buck with the Montreal production.
There was one school in downtown Montreal that we shot at quite a bit, and it had the greatest basement. It was all full of boilers and weird things. I didn't even think they were working anymore. We shot so many episodes down there. One of the challenges was signage, you know, because we couldn't see French signs.
Yeah.
For scenes that were set in dark, creepy woods, an arboretum in Montreal was used. However, due to a law, the crew were not allowed to harm the mosquitoes or use pesticides to get rid of them.
Because it was an arboretum, which meant it was protected, which meant we couldn't spray for mosquitoes, which meant we all had like mosquito netting on the whole time, and it was just like, it was horrible.
The mosquitoes also affected the actors who were trying to perform, but had to deal with the annoyance of all the mosquitoes. And apparently certain takes were chosen on the account that they didn't feature cast members trying to swat the pesky little bugs.
One interesting thing is we shot in a lot of cemeteries, and there are a lot of cemeteries in Montreal.
That there are.
But on the mountain there are actually two big cemeteries. But one's a Catholic cemetery and one's just a generic Christian cemetery.
And they're right next to each other.
And so we wanted to shoot an episode in the Catholic cemetery, but they wouldn't let us do it. We have nothing against shooting an episode in the cemetery. It's that as Catholics, we don't believe in ghosts. So if you want to shoot a funeral scene for an episode of a show, knock yourself out. But if you're saying there's ghosts here, you can't do it. So we had to go, okay, thank you very much. And move over to the other cemetery where they're like, yeah, sure, ghosts, yeah, fine. Whatever you want. There are many a morning where we'd wake up as the sun's coming up in the cemetery having breakfast and bagels on tombstones because we're shooting in the cemetery all night.
One of your episodes called The Frozen Ghost was shot at a bed and breakfast that my family owns in Hudson called Rivers Mead.
Seriously?
Yeah, and the funny thing about it, DJ, this is a true story. I'm watching the Frozen Ghost episode in the freaking place that it was shot, and a family member walks in and says, "That's here. That's the kitchen. Wait, was that what they were shooting? Yeah, that's the place." And I'm like, and I'm 10 or 11. I'm like, wait a second, Melissa Joan Hart was in this house? It was just so surreal to be, and then that wall broke, and then I realized, oh right, there's probably sets and locations to all these episodes, you know, things you don't think of when you're 9 or 10 or 11 years old.
So now let's get to our favorite episodes. The Tale of the Dark Music has definitely stuck with people for its darker story. I enjoyed this episode because it felt a little more adult. In fact, I kept drawing parallels between this and other popular books and movies in the horror genre.
The Dark Music monster lives in the root cellar of a house owned by a man named Niles. Niles' great-nephew Andy and his family move into the house when Andy's mother inherits it. Andy soon discovers something eerie is going on, as whenever music is on near the door, it begins to rattle and eventually opens, revealing horrifying visions.
Hello, Andy. Come on in.
The different forms this monster takes are pretty disturbing. The carnival guy is one of them.
Oh, don't stop now, son. You're almost here. What's the matter, Andy? Don't you want to have some fun?
But by far, the scariest was this giant doll.
Hi, Andy. Won't you come play with me?
No! Nope. No. The doll nearly persuades Andy to go with her, but his mom turns off the electricity, the radio turns off, and she's sucked into the hell portal.
Holy balls! What the hell? Just when you think it can't get any darker for a kid's show, the ending tops it.
This is Coda, the neighborhood punk. He bonks Coda on the head with a wooden block and leads him into the cellar. Andy kicks on some heavy metal and the door glows red. We don't see the monster, but Coda appears to be seeing it in its true form, and he's terrified. After some time has passed and the basement gets quiet, Andy goes back down to find Coda, but only finds a brand new bike.
I'll give you anything you want. You only have to do one thing.
What's that?
Feed me.
As his sister comes home, Andy gives the viewer a fiendish look. Damn, Coda got eaten alive. That's a rough concept for anyone to fathom, let alone a little kid.
And if you look at that doll right now from that show, and then look at Squid Game, it's the same doll.
Interesting. Shiny Red Bicycle is the one that seems to
yes,
be
that's
from
kids.
That was one that I thought really dealt with the death of this poor kid that fell, and the locks in Montreal, and it felt kind of real and heavy. And the one that females always talk to me about, the one that scared the hell out of them, was the doll maker. For some reason, girls really found the doll maker really scary.
In just its second season, Are You Afraid of the Dark would debut one of its scariest monsters to date. But it wasn't some modern twist on a monster we already knew. It was an homage to the age of silent film, and the origins of perhaps one of the most famous creatures of all time.
The Tale of the Midnight Madness. This episode is hard to beat as far as this series goes. I'm still haunted by it to this day. We open at a beautiful old movie theater, and sadly it's empty.
The Tale of the Midnight Madness follows the employees and owner of the struggling Rialto Theater as they attempt to save it from foreclosure. But when a mysterious stranger offers them a contract to success, they learn that breaking it could be deadly.
Dr. Vink is a filmmaker, and he's here to revive the theater for free. And he has a neat horror film, a vampire flick, where the vampire wins. Pete loves the old movies so much. He watches it every chance he can. He sees something freaky that night. Nosferatu has exited the movie screen, but he might have been sleeping. Oh no, Nosferatu. The last ghoul anyone wants to encounter, let's be honest. The kids are running mad. They decide to barricade themselves inside a room and creepy, pasty fingers creep towards them. Ew, that's enough to creep me out.
I always loved how this monster from a silent film never made noise. It's a really creepy touch. Pete climbs back through the screen in a reverse ring shot, but where this vampire is going, it doesn't need a screen, cause that mother sucker can teleport. But Pete knows this movie, and he makes an executive decision to change the ending. So he pulls back that curtain and lets the sun shine, which dissolves the vampire and kills him for good. I really liked the way they had the vampire die in the same way as the original 1922 film. It's a nice little detail.
This one is so memorable and fun, and like nothing else I ever watched as a kid. This one haunted me for years. This one might unlock a whirlwind of memories because it did for me. The setting and stories stick out to me in this one above so many others. They picked a perfectly pretty theater to shoot this at too. I'd love to go to one as cool as this one day for a fun, spooky movie trip.
My favorite episode is the show we did at the beginning of the second season. It was called The Tale of the Midnight Madness. The reason it was my favorite episode was the first time that I felt like we finally got it. This is what we're capable of doing. We're firing on all cylinders. Yeah, this is the quintessential Are You Afraid of the Dark? That was a breakthrough episode for me, so that's why it's my favorite.
One that always got me was the Ghastly Grinner story. For some reason, that dude's smile has stuck with me through the years.
The Ghastly Grinner episode really stuck with me because it was about a comic book and a comic book artist and seeing a villain come to life. Like, oh my god, that was like one of the coolest episodes ever, and still to this day people always bring him up.
Betty Ann tells the story of an aspiring teenage comic book writer who is given the one existing issue of a mysterious comic book whose author disappeared called The Ghastly Grinner, which includes victims that end up stuck in unstoppable hysterical laughter, and basically the whole town starts to fall victim to the same fate.
Seeing people fall into the Grinner's lunacy is almost as unsettling as he is himself.
You know where this is all going, but for the main character, their world starts to collapse and blur itself with fantasy until they're completely isolated, at which point, well...
Creepy as hell.
He's art, he's fan busts, there's tattoos, it's insane how some of these characters have lived on and on and on.
The Ghastly Grinner was a creation of Ron Oliver, who directed a lot of episodes. One of the people that is just the most amazing person, thank God we found her, was a woman by the name of Annick Chartier, who's from Montreal, who was our makeup artist. And she created pretty much 95% of all the monsters in the show. And she was making it up as she was going along. And so she created the Ghastly Grinner, along with Claire Nadon, who did the costume for the Ghastly Grinner. And I just heard this the other day. Apparently, I don't know if she was talking about me or Ron. I don't remember. One of us wanted the Ghastly Grinner to be white like the Joker. And she's like, no, you don't want to do that. It's been done. It's like, let's make him yellow. And we're like, yellow? Really? She goes, no, trust me, it'll be great.
You wanted him white. You wanted, and I said, no, let's not do it. Let's do primary color, yellow, blue. And you were fighting me. So let me do it. Let me do it.
Yep.
And I want him yellow, and you're yellow.
And I love the fact that we had those discussions 30 years ago, whatever it was, and today people are getting tattoos of the Ghastly Grinner on their arm. I think that's so great.
I had this like 10 days in Montreal where I got to like hang out in a comic book shop overnight. And to this day, it's the one thing that I've ever done that directors I work with bring up.
People talk to me about that show all the time. I have no idea why. I think it's because the idea that your parents turn into zombies and they're crazy and they're laughing and it's weird, that disconnect.
The clown from Laughing in the Dark. Oh, that's a freaky one.
Zeebo was a clown in the 1920s who stole his circus's payroll and when chased by police, ran into a nearby funhouse. While hiding, he dropped his cigar and was trapped inside as the funhouse burned down around him. He perished in the flames, but years later, the funhouse was rebuilt and a Zeebo dummy was installed at the ending. In this tale, a boy named Josh brazenly steals the Zeebo dummy's nose on a dare. However, that didn't sit well with Zeebo himself, as Josh begins to realize just what he has done.
Give it back. Give it back.
Intimidation, and in the creepiest way possible. This is my favorite bit from the episode.
The episode basically ends with the circus carny smoking one of the cigars, implying that he's actually been Zeebo's ghost the whole time.
Okay, that's even scarier. This children's show has boggled me. But that's smoke. I think that's just from all the Montreal smokers. That
cloud of smoke.
That cloud of smoke wafting in off of the terrace outside.
And of course, I love the connection with Sixth Sense, which we're all going to take credit for from.
The season 3 episode, The Tale of the Dream Girl, actually inspired M. Night Shyamalan to make The Sixth Sense.
Oh, bro, is this going to be like a super serious episode and that's why they took it off Paramount Plus?
The Tale of the Dream Girl.
Oh, I'm all nervous now. No, is this going to like blow my socks?
No way, why would I have been here? I'm in a cemetery.
What's happening?
Well, why don't you tell me, Johnny? You remember what happened. Car stalled on the tracks, right? And then what happened, Johnny?
I tried to push her out of the way, but it was too late.
Oh my god. Knew it was coming.
Dude, what? Johnny! I'm really gonna miss you, Eric.
Oh my god, dude, this is so sad.
You know, you're my favorite sister.
I'm gonna cry. No.
You're a ghost and you don't know it.
And moments like when a girl moves into an apartment and her only friend is this lonely old lady that lives down the hall, and then she ends up making some new friends, and she's supposed to hang out with this sweet old lady, and she says, I just don't want to be alone that day. She makes some friends that are her age, they invite her to a concert, and then when she gets back and our apartment is empty, and then you just see the old woman in the dark, she's like, you were supposed to be here.
It was my anniversary 10 years ago. On that day is the day I died!
This is the day I died! And I'm like, to this day? Dude, I'm 37. I watched this 2 weeks ago and I almost pissed my pants. The instant guilt of thinking, oh my god, did I ever do that kind of stuff too?
Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I call this story The Tale of the Night Shift.
No, what in the fuck are we in for now?
The finale of season 5 has a genuinely terrifying moment that even as an adult, I said to myself when this scene happened, oh, shit!
No, I don't think we're supposed to.
What? Enough.
As an adult, that startled me, but can you imagine being a middle schooler and seeing that for the first time? I mean, scarred for life.
The vampire might be the most threatening villain on the show, period.
Oh my god.
It can shapeshift into many forms and uses those guises to infiltrate the hospital and its staff.
We haven't been properly introduced yet.
The vampire's design is amazing. It has a lot of zombie in it, which makes him that much more chilling.
That design is good for a show like this.
I shall drop you and then lick up what's left. Holy shit, this is a Nickelodeon show.
I have to show how they kill him, because that's equally as nuts.
This is a Nickelodeon show.
You're grown-ass men, but maybe you could look at this through the prism of a child's eyes. But what episodes Are You Afraid of the Dark did you find the most scary to watch? I'd say Dead Man's Float.
My personal favorite, The Tale of the Dead Man's Float.
The episode that still haunts me to this day, and I mean this, was The Tale of the Dead Man's Float.
Tale of the Dead Man's Float.
I just got goosebumps. This show gives me more goosebumps than goosebumps.
Yes, that is a young Jay Baruchel playing Joe. He would appear on the series a few more times once they revived it for the final 2 seasons.
Oh no. No, Zeke.
There's nobody down there. I'm telling you, grab me.
It's back. Or maybe it never left. My girlfriend's little brother drowned on my watch, but
he was the doofus in the beginning.
When they built the pool, they had to get rid of an old cemetery and move the bodies.
There's a pool, and there's this invisible ghost that they can smell, and as soon as they put this product in the pool, it turns all the water red, and then all of a sudden, for the first time, you see this, like, literally rotting dead ghost.
Oh, what? Dude, that's fucking crazy sick. That is fucking awesome. Are you shitting me?
Damn, so well done.
Here is why this was voted one of the scariest episodes of the series. This is quite possibly the scariest looking monster that has ever appeared on a kid's show, let alone Nickelodeon.
That is it. Look at this. Look at this. They showed this to kids.
Creepy. Even when you see it now, it doesn't look aged or dated or the makeup or whatever. Like it's coming out of the pool is like, it's so iconic.
What an iconic looking bloody skin sagging skeleton monster. I'd expect to see this thing in an adult horror movie, but not on Nickelodeon, and I love it. This thing has lived in my head for like 20 years, and I won't be surprised if I remember this thing 20 years from now.
How they beat him with science isn't a bad ending either.
Your red cat!
Has anyone ever tried to cosplay as the pool zombie? If so, I would love to see it.
We'd also be remiss if we didn't mention the incredibly spooky opening credit sequence. If you're a 90s kid, odds are that creepy swing haunted your dreams every night.
Another memorable aspect of Are You Afraid of the Dark is its haunting theme.
If you remember anything about Are You Afraid of the Dark, it might be the iconic intro.
That's the first 30 seconds, and I already have goosebumps. Not those goosebumps, but not those goosebumps.
Like, holy hell, okay, this intro is NSFK. It's not safe for kids.
Frickin' clown, man.
It likely delayed my viewing of the series for about a year or so, but I finally did get into it. I really got into it. It's so iconic though. The intro is probably the first thing you think of when the show comes up.
And the match at the end with the title card is super memorable, very creative, and pretty cool. The iconic theme was composed by American musician Jeff Zahn. There is a slower, more subtle, scary version at the start, and then a louder, more bombastic version in the end credits. The composers for the theme, as well as the contributors of music for the broader show, were Jeff Zahn and Jeff Fisher. Zahn also wrote the theme song for Arthur, which is without a doubt a banger when it comes to theme songs.
What a wonderful kind of day. Learn to work and play.
How about Arthur in this one? The theme just came to him in his head when he was at the Montreal airport waiting for his plane to arrive.
While waiting, he thought about the premise of the show being about ghouls and ghosts and mysteries and other paranormal going-ons, and the aspect of it being a children's show. And just like that, he started to sing the theme tune. He needed to write it down quickly, but on the account that he was at an airport waiting for a flight, he didn't have any music paper, so he wrote the notes down on a napkin. As soon as he got to a piano, he created the rest of the theme, and claims that the whole thing just came to him very quickly and easily. And so, one trip to an airport later, and a classic memorable children's theme tune was created.
Despite the fact it's a spooky show, I consider it a warm blanket or a cup of soup to, feel comforting, to go back in time. I honestly was rewatching it and just thinking about what a quality program it was, and understanding the more older I get, I'm like circumstances, budget, kid acting, all these things in your way essentially, and still to make something so great.
Think about this. We did a first season of a show. I had no idea that anybody was even watching this show. I was up in Montreal. I wasn't looking at ratings. All I know is I was delivering a show and Nickelodeon said they liked it, and so I was like, okay.
We still get asked about the show, and people come up to us constantly, to this day and say how it was such a huge part of their childhood.
Ross gets asked so much about it, he even made a documentary for his YouTube channel.
Let's now talk about the forecast for this weekend. We have meteorologist Ross Hall with us here tonight.
A lot of people ask me how I got from acting to weather as well, but it's simple. I was telling scary stories back in the day, and now I tell scary weather stories as well.
That's a really cute baby.
Thanks. Hey, Mom, it's that guy from TV.
Oh, yeah. Isn't he the weatherman?
I met someone from Beirut who recognized me. I mean, the show was like sold around the world.
Tell me some stories about you guys venturing into America for Are You Afraid of the Dark reasons, because everyone in Canada watching this show would just assume, like, look at these Montrealers done well. Yeah, good old boys here. But in the States, this show was a phenomenon. Taking Montreal, putting it on the map without really mentioning it was Montreal. No one looks at those fake woods and says, hey, look at Canada there.
I don't think we really grasp how popular it was. For me, when I realized, wow, this has really had an impact on people because they still remember the show this long after.
All right, so here we are at the 92Y. Behind me is the reception party. Let's see how this goes.
Hi, Ross.
Hi there. How you doing? When I walked in, I honestly wondered if people would still recognize me. Hi there. Certainly, yeah. Do they still air the show here in the U.S. anymore? Or?
We have to pretty much get it. The DVD's from Canada.
These people had very good memories.
Huge fan of yours, man.
Thanks for watching.
Are You Afraid
That's awesome.
Thanks for the nightmares.
You're definitely my favorite character.
No problem.
Are You Afraid of the Dark? I as well.
You've got my...
I do. I brought a lot of pictures of people I knew. It's such a great show. It's like the Twilight Zone of the 90s.
Yeah, you made this poor girl's life a living hell.
Did I?
I am so happy I get to meet you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming. It hit me like a wave.
This is like meeting your best friends after a long time, man.
I have this for you to sign.
Oh, wow.
Could you send my softball?
I certainly can. I haven't signed a softball yet. This is a Nickelodeon ball. Where did you get this?
And does it kind of seem surreal to you now that people are still so into everything?
It's just like you do a show and it's kind of like it was a part of my life, but you don't really think that people will remember it.
Oh,
like, you know what I mean?
trust me.
So
they do, and we have drinking games. It was actually my absolute favorite.
Was it really?
show.
The biggest fan of that show. Oh my god.
Grown men, women, even kids.
I'm 20 years old. I didn't start really getting into it until I started watching episodes on YouTube.
The series has also been praised for having helped to create a generation of feminist horror fans, as it showed kids a world where girls got to be the imperfect heroes just as often as the boys.
I always wanted to be the protagonist in one of the stories because I never felt empowered in that way in real life, but I knew I was capable. I could totally stand up to Zebo, obviously. This show showed us that as kids, we were in charge of our own destiny no matter what was in the way.
DJ also believed that kids were a lot smarter than you give them credit for, and that they could handle more sophisticated subjects, and that he could also push the horror further.
For me in elementary school and through middle school, watching Are You Afraid of the Dark felt almost like I was sort of sneaking something my parents maybe wouldn't have wanted me to watch at the time. I felt like I was just sort of sneaking it by. And I think for a lot of kids they had a similar experience because it felt like it was just maybe a little more mature than everything else they were used to. And back then, sometimes my friends and I would build a fort or something and read scary stories to each other. I don't know how much inspired by Are You Afraid of the Dark we were, but I know now thinking back on those times that I definitely connect those two events. There's nothing better than that when you're a kid. There's nothing better than sitting around with your friends and scaring the wits out of each other. And this show did that for us.
Are You Afraid of the Dark may have had plenty of nightmare fuel, but it also filled us with many great memories of watching this amazing show. It was the perfect introduction to horror to young audiences who were starting to get intrigued and fascinated by the horror genre.
I'd like to think that this show inspired lots of kids to tell each other their own scary stories, form their own midnight societies, and maybe guide them down creative paths that led to something professional in, certain cases.
Are You Afraid of the Dark is best remembered as a pure, joyful celebration of the genre. It actually kickstarted the whole horror kid show boom of the 90s, early 2000s, given it debuted 5 years prior to Goosebumps in Halloween 1990.
Goosebumps versus Dark real quick. They were kind of pulling directors from Dark to do Goosebumps when it first started. I remember going in to do Goosebumps and there was a real strong kind of jealousy. Like, we don't want to talk about Dark. We don't want to talk about Dark. Don't talk about Dark. Don't mention it. Don't mention Dark. Goosebumps, it always had kind of this sinister feel to it. They always did kind of those gotcha scares at the end. DJ and Ned brilliantly couched the stories of, the tales around a campfire. And you always knew you were going to come back to friends around a fire and they were just telling stories. And I thought that was part of the coolness of it.
When I watched Are You Afraid of the Dark, my family was still living in Norway. It would be on after the children's programming ended. Remember, my friend and I were just obsessed with it. We'd watch it religiously every Saturday night. We were so curious where the show was made that we actually watched to the end of the credits and we found out it was made in Canada.
So when you moved to Canada, when you found out you were moving to Canada,
I was so excited. I was like, oh yeah, we're moving to the country where they made Are You Afraid of the Dark? That was like a very cool and civilized place.
There's some things that really stick with you. There's one moment, it's more of a nostalgic moment that brings tears to my eyes. The Carney, who's played by Aaron Tager, who just passed away not that long ago, who also played Dr. Vink. When it gets to the end and then the Carney, Aaron, comes onto the screen and he's got a cigar like Zebo and he says,
It's the most fun in the park when you're laughing in the dark.
Snick is over. But Snick will be back in just 166 hours and counting.
Rapture!